Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to the Hearthstone Weekly Show. Now, I've done a quality check, so if there is any blurriness on the video, it is Twitch's fault, and there is nothing I can do about it. The actual quality on the video, I've checked, I improved it slightly, so yeah, that's on Twitch's end. If the actual video on YouTube is blurry, I'll link the video to the Twitch video, like on the archive, and then it should be okay. So yeah, that's a thing. But anyway, so for anyone who didn't actually catch the announcement video, the weekly topic for this week is Arkcruiser's Hunter deck, which is an incredibly interesting deck. It's a Hunter deck that made Legend. He's one of the only Hunters in Legend, and his deck looks nothing like the standard Hunter deck. I played it in a tournament yesterday, and apart from a couple misplays I made because I'm not used to the deck, it was an extremely fun deck to play and actually was quite effective. So I have this video of him, which I got off his stream, of when he actually hit Legend. We're going to watch a couple of games. Now, he does go 6 and then 6 wins, 3 losses from rank 1 to Legend. So we're going to be examining some of the games, hopefully until he gets to Legend. I'm not sure how much time we're going to have, but the games are very, very short with this deck. So we're going to go until probably about 45-minute mark to an hour. And any losses, we're just going to talk about why it was losing, sort of the weaknesses behind the deck, and some of the strengths, which is made apparent by the fact that he managed to go all the way up to Legend with a Hunter. So anyway, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? So, this is on Twitch, so video player is a problem. So we look at Wolf Rider, Leper Gnome, Abomination. Now, sending back the Wolf Rider looks ridiculous, but the curve in his deck is so low that it is actually worth it. Now, the actual deck list, I won't go over the deck list. I'm gonna put the actual deck list in the description of the video, which will go up tomorrow, hopefully. Yeah, tomorrow probably. I'll put the deck in the actual description. It'll be a thing on Hearthstone. Because this deck is so weird that examining the deck list actually doesn't do much. You need to see it played more than the actual deck list helps out. So that deck will be in the description. Anyway, so as we see here, and giant play button, really? Is this entirely necessary? I hate Twitch sometimes. Basically, Leper Gnome into Loot Hoarder is one of the only draw power strategies in this entire deck. Doesn't need draw. The whole point of the deck is to rush down your opponent as fast as possible. Everything in this deck does direct. Everything in this deck does direct, more or less. So even things like Reckless Rocketeer are used to do damage. Now Animal Companion in this deck is always good. All 3 are powerful. Leonk buffs up small minions, which you always have on the board, as we see from the Leper Gnome Loot Hoarder. Misha is a powerhouse as a 4-forward taunt, and Huffer gets in damage for free. 4 damage, straight up. It's essentially an Argent Commander on turn 3 for this deck. That's all it needs, is the charge. So you'll see this deck a lot of the time will just go for the face as opposed to trading, because if it trades, it loses damage. So this deck doesn't tend to prefer trading. It tends to just go straight for your opponent. We're going to see an Arathi Weaponsmith. Now, Arathi Weaponsmith is actually a pretty horrible counter to this, because he's going to take a bunch of damage. So what we might see here is probably Eaglehorn Bow, maybe, and just attack him straight up. He might trade with the 3/3, but that might not happen. He's going to go for the kill command because he doesn't have that many beasts, and the 5 damage is really useful while you can actually use it. The only beasts he plays are Animal Companions, if I recall, so getting a 5 damage kill command off is very, very useful. So now we see the warrior in a very, very awkward position. This is turn 4 and he's on 9 health, and he hasn't really been able to stem the bleeding at all. So we're going to see a Warsong Commander into double Molten Giant. That'd be kind of hilarious. What is this, the fastest combo ever? turn 4 Molten Giant combo. This is brilliant. I think this is a turn 4 Molten Giant combo. I find that kind of hilarious, to be honest. But he's going straight for Arkcruiser. Incredibly risky. Incredibly risky with the amount of charge in his deck. However, it might actually pay off here. Arkcruiser may just have to go straight for his opponent. The Warsong Commander poses a lot of issues here. If he takes out the Warsong Commander, then he has a chance of winning. So yeah, he's going to take out the Warsong Commander and then just go straight for his opponent. Again, Hero Powering instead of Novice Engineer shows where the strength of this deck lies, which is in direct. And Reckless Rocketeer presents lethal. So the Molten Giant combo is something which we see a lot of on ladder nowadays, and with Warsong Commander it essentially allows you to do 16 damage for free, and with Youthful Brewmasters you can bounce both Molten Giants and play them again, and you get another attack in, plus the 2 Youthfuls attack. It's a lot of damage. It's lethal from full, I'll put it that way. Now Shield Block presents a lot of issues. A lot of issues. To the point when I think that might be good game. I think this would be good game for the warrior here. He actually wins this game. Now, the main reason why I decided not to just pick 3 cases of when the deck works is 1, because these games are incredibly short. This is turn 6 and the game's over. 2 is because showcasing a deck is not always about showcasing when it wins. It's about showcasing when it can lose at times. And in this case, it lost because the deck he's playing against actually benefits from low health. So he benefits from low health, and he's exploiting the fact that Arkcruiser is attacking. So Molten Giant combo is a very good counter to this kind of deck. But as we're going to see as we go into the next couple games, most decks in the format have severe difficulties dealing with this amount of rush. But something to note if you are going to try this deck out is the fact that Molten Giant combo can really, really mess you up. Like, really mess you up. Is, as I said, because they sustain themselves through armor, and then by doing that, they just play their Molten Giants and get the combo off, and it's a very powerful way of countering these kinds of rush decks. So, on to the second game. Anyway, in between games, I'm going to be taking a few questions in chat for anyone who wants to ask. Because this is a stream video, and I'll skip ahead if there's like a break. But I'm not going to skip ahead in the intermediate periods, because the Twitch video player has a habit of screwing up. I think this is a whole hand mulligan. Keeping the misdirection. I can see why you keep the misdirection. Is because of the Warlock aggro, probably. And misdirection is good against Warlock aggro. This hand, however, is horrible for this kind of deck. This hand is really bad. You want some early creatures. Priest decks, in my experience, one priest decks aren't played that much at the moment, but they can. They definitely can hold this off. Not reliably. They can hold it off, but if they don't get Defender of Argus taunts down, they are still going to die. The healing helps out, but not that much. Warlock aggro, which is the matchup he has currently, has about 40% win rate against this. In this case, we're seeing one of the possible worst openings imaginable for this deck, which would be no creatures. Now, this play here is something I actually want to talk about. Again, giant black button. Playing the Elven Archer Misdirect. I actually want to talk about this because maybe it's just how risky of a player I am, but I would probably play the Animal Companion. Just because Animal Companion deals with this board fairly decently, unless you get Huffer, and then it doesn't deal with it decently, which is probably why he didn't roll it. By playing Misdirection, you're taking a chance on killing the Blood Imp, and he's sort of betting on the fact that the Warlock is going to attack him, but the Warlock may also be fearing an explosive trap. But that kind of strategy doesn't always work, especially not against Warlock aggro, where they tend to just go for you. So something that might happen here is attacking the Elven Archer with the Argent Squire, and then attacking Arkcruiser with the Voidwalker, which could kill either the Blood Imp or the Squire, which is what he's thinking of here. His opponent might play around explosive, not misdirect. The problem is if the Voidwalker just attacks the hero, he's in a really, really bad spot. So both of them are risky, but I think this one is relying too much on the fact that his opponent is going to play in a way that makes sense to him, whereas it might not make sense to his opponent. Fortunately, his opponent is playing as if it's Explosive Trap, which is the intelligent play, and he's going to power overwhelming his Blood Imp, which is unbelievably stupid. Unbelievably. Like, I'm just gonna go over that. Never power overwhelming a Blood Imp to attack into what you think is an Explosive Trap. If you're gonna do that, though, if you want to play the power overwhelming, do not attack with the Blood Imp. One, it could be explosive, and that's what you're playing around. But it could be Freezing Trap, Misdirection. Both of those would mess him up so much in that play. The correct way of doing that would be to attack with the Voidwalker after power overwhelming your Blood Imp. So the Voidwalker cannot kill the Blood Imp and then attacking with the Blood Imp. It's still a 2 for 1, but you get 5 damage in instead of no damage in this case. So that was a really big misplay from his opponent. And it might cost him the game because he's lost his early game advantage. Yeah, he's going for the safe play as opposed to the risky play, which is the Animal Companion. Question is, does he play the Abusive? I think I agree with him. Playing the Abusive keeps him board position. Again, I'm the kind of person that would play the Animal Companion there, but I'm a really big fan of Animal Companion. I love that card. It always does good things for me. Wow, double Young Priestess. And he missed both triggers. That's super unlucky. I think Kill Command... Also, he's playing against this spammer. Kill Command Loot Hoarder, probably. Yeah, Kill Command Loot Hoarder. This is one of the very few matchups where this deck trades. This deck normally never trades. It just goes straight for your opponent. But against Warlocks, sometimes you have to trade, especially if you get a controlling hand as opposed to an attacking hand, which is what he prefers to play with. Warlock's annoying me. Yeah, Animal Companion works out here. And the Wolf Rider on the offense will deal 4 damage, which is a big chunk. Leroy Jenkins can also deal a lot of damage. So now, I really hope he squelches that guy. Wow. Now we see a situation where the Warlock, while being offensive, is actually losing out on health because of life tap, which is something which a lot of people don't take advantage of. Life tap actually costs health. It's... wow. Is this guy the most patient person in the world? I would have squelched that guy about 3 turns ago. Anyway, um, but we're starting to see a situation where this hunter deck can take advantage of the lack of defense from a Warlock. Alright, thanks, Lumberary Mine. The deck list I'm actually going to post up on the video. The video that goes up on my YouTube channel, I'm gonna be putting the deck list up on there, and the main reason is the deck is so weird that explaining the deck list doesn't do as much as just watching 1 or 2 extra games. And I'm gonna pause before he goes ahead without me. So I'm gonna actually do it that way. I'm gonna put up the list and the description of the YouTube video, and more go over the plays being made as opposed to the actual deck. Also, yeah, it's my internet. My internet isn't horrible, but my upload isn't amazing. That's where the quality problems come in. Anyway, so as we're going to see is he's trading up some of the stuff, and because he got Misha, he's going to trade away because he has the biggest creature, and he also has a Leroy in his hand, which makes up for some of the damage. The Hunter Hero Power, along with Life Tap, is actually doing a lot of damage to this Warlock, which is where the matchup advantage comes in for this Hunter deck. Because, as I said before, most decks cannot take advantage of the fact that Warlock aggro is horrible at defense. It's very good at offense, but as soon as the tables are turned on it, it tends to lose because of Life Tap. It actually does hurt. It stacks up over time, but most decks can't take advantage of it. Like in this case, he has to spend his whole hand to kill this Misha. And if you notice, he did a lot of damage there, but his whole hand is gone. And now there's an Abomination. Abomination probably just wins in the game here. Leroy Abomination is pretty much good game. He might just go Abomination into Hero Power. Does less damage, but the Leroy is better surprise. But this is one of the reasons why the Abomination is in the deck. It lets you play like this against aggro decks, which is normally suicide. You can't play like this against aggro decks. But if you have an Abomination in your deck, or 2 in this case, then the direct damage is actually really important. And yeah, he made a slight misplay there, where he should have attacked with the Whelps and then played Leroy, because Knife Juggler can in fact do that. In this case, I don't think it's going to matter, but it can, is the point. So he's going to get in 2 less damage, which is semi-relevant. Now, unless he has some sort of power overwhelming Soulfire, there aren't that many ways back for Mr. Siren Song. Flame Imp is admitting to losing, I think, at this point. He had no other play. And that's a good game. That really does show... That game, it looked quite close. And when you're playing, it seems close. But if you actually analyze the game, he had board control for quite a while in that game. And because of that, he just put on the pressure, and the life taps plus hero powers add up, along with all the direct damage, and you just kill your opponent faster than he can kill you, which is the main playstyle within this deck. And that's one of the reasons why it's, 1, so fun to play, and 2, it works. The metagame is not tuned for this kind of deck at all. Yeah, Silence was a win for the Warlock, but no one plays Silences. That's one of the best things about Abomination. No one plays Silences at the moment. Apart from Druids. Only Druid plays Silence. If you look at all the top decks at the moment, no one plays Silence. It's incredible. Like, it's one of the most underestimated abilities in the entire game at the moment. Anyway, if we look at this opening hand, he has 1-drop, 2-drop, and Leroy is a bit of an annoying card to have in your opening hand, but it's not impossible to play with. Yeah, as I said, Thomas, silence is incredibly underestimated right now. Almost no one runs silence. It's the downfall of a lot of people, actually. Now, we're going to see Elven Archer, I would presume. Yeah. Now, keeping Elven Archer for Divine Shields is debatably better, but keeping the +2 on a charge minion is very important. Like, what we're going to see here is most likely just Abusive Sergeant trade. Abusive Sergeant Leper Gnome. I'm guessing he's going to trade. As I said, this kind of deck is very odd. But yeah, the trading does make sense because you lose the attack buff. Now, he's in a bit of a board advantage right now. I would expect to see a Loot Hoarder unless he draws some sort of Wolf Rider or Kill Command or Animal Companion, being the power plays on turn 3. So we're probably going to see the Loot Hoarder play here. Just ignore the Silver Hand and just go for the Loot Hoarder play. Would make the most sense. The other one is Hero Power, but it doesn't make sense to me. He's actually going to go for the Hero Power. Interesting. I'm not sure I agree with that. I guess he's thinking, well, what do I want to go on turn 4? But I would have probably just Loot Hoarder to cycle. Gives you a better turn 3 play, possibly. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about that. Okay, that's a big tell that he has a Consecration. That's a massive, massive warning light that he has a Consecration. So I think Loot Hoarder, Hero Power, and then just go straight for him. If he wants to Consecrate, then he can take 2 extra damage, and Arc gets to draw out of this. So yeah, if your opponent does not spend their Silver Hand Recruit to kill things, he most likely has a Consecration. I'd be extremely surprised if we don't see one here. Yeah, there it is. Telegraphed. We're going to see the single deadly shot come up, which at first, once you actually see the deck list on the video, as I said, I'll put the link up there, it looks odd to have one deadly shot. But if you think about it, you don't need the double deadly shot in this deck. You just need one to deal with anything really large, like an Ironbark or an Ancient of War, which you can't get over. Now, the version I've been playing has one Silence instead of Leroy Jenkins for a sort of budget thing, because I don't have a Leroy. But I think Leroy is very, very powerful. But RMB Cal would help out a lot with situations like this, for example. No, the video will be going up. The actual weekly show, when this goes up on YouTube, I'll put the deck in the description. So, yeah, as we see, the one deadly shot does help out there. Weirdly enough, the Abomination is actually bad to play against this deck. It seems counterintuitive, but everything in this deck is designed to deal one burst of damage and then die. So by playing Abomination, all you really do is accelerate your own death, which is kind of hilarious if you think about it, because that's what Abomination is designed not to do. And we're just going to see a very, very easy win here from either Reckless Rocketeer or Leroy Jenkins. Now, the better play here, actually, funnily enough, it doesn't matter in this situation, but Reckless Rocketeer was a definite win, and Leroy Jenkins was a 25% not win. Random interaction with Knife Juggler that comes up once every so often. But keep that in mind, because if his opponent had something like a Defender of Argus, he would have been in big trouble. But he didn't have a Defender of Argus. But if he did, he would have been in big trouble because he took some random risk. So don't make that mistake. Do not put a Leroy down with a Knife Juggler on the board. We've actually seen that twice now with Leroy Knife Juggler. We had the previous game as well where Knife Juggler killed 2 Whelps when he could have got the double damage in. So yeah, random thing to keep an eye on. Do not play Leroy Jenkins when your opponent has a Knife Juggler on the board. So Now, we've seen so far, we've watched 3 games. We've seen what this deck is bad against, being sort of the decks that actually enjoy getting damage counters on their hero, in the case of Molten Giant decks, that can sustain through armor. And we've also seen that Warlock aggro has some serious issues against this deck. It can beat it, but it self-damaging does not help. Now, in the last game, we basically just saw that aggro decks in general, between the last game and the Warlock aggro game, I'll take the intermission here between games to talk about this. Aggro decks do not have good defense. As I said earlier, Warlock aggro has the worst defense but highest offense. And as we saw there, you need a really high offense to even stand a chance against this deck. That last game was not even close. And random thing, I think this is a full hand mulligan. There's so many 1 and 2 drops in this deck that you really want one in your opening hand. So aggro decks are very bad against this. Like, extremely bad. Now, sustain decks can do well against this, and Druid decks have a very good matchup against this, depending on the Druid deck. Large amounts of taunt, like Druid of the Claw, Ancient of War, Ironbark Protector, not so much, because it comes down a bit too late. But Innervate, Ancient of War, if the person piloting the Hunter deck does not have the Deadly Shot in their hand, it's game over. They can't kill a turn 5 Ancient of War. You just win. It's completely game over. So I actually do think that this deck has some seriously bad matchups against Druid Ramp with a couple of healing touches mixed in with Ancient of Wars, and against Molten Giants. However, against aggro decks, which is what's being played a lot right now, it has a very good matchup, and against Rogue Cantrip, it has probably about 70%, which is one of the reasons why it's quite popular right now. This kind of deck is being played a lot in the competitive community recently because it has a good matchup against Rogue Cantrip and Warlock aggro. Now, just a random thing, not playing the buff on that particular Leponome, it makes sense in the fact that you lose the buff, but I'm not sure if it makes sense in the fact that the body on the board may have been better. Because what he's going to do is he's going to play it now anyway, so why not just play it the turn before? Is my reasoning in that. So, as we can see, the deck looks very, very simple, but there are methods of actually playing it which are not particularly obvious. And it is quite easy to make a mistake every so often with this deck. It doesn't matter how simple the deck is. Sometimes you can make mistakes with it. Now, I think I either like the Explosive Trap Hero Power or the Abomination. I think saving Abomination is better for later on. He hasn't used the coin yet, which means he can go Abomination into Hero Power on turn 6, for example. But saving Abomination as creature removal is much better. Now, this is where some of the problems are probably going to start. Against Ramp, he has to bet on the fact that his opponent does not have a removal for this, or a silence. A silence would really mess him up. He does have the removal. He can kill it with Argent Commander, but against Druid decks, as I said, it has some serious issues. We might even see a Animal Companion into Kill Command, or an Argent Commander. He's going to go for the Argent Commander. It's arguably the safer play because it's more card efficient, but it's less powerful overall. You get a 4-2 as opposed to a potential 4-4, for example. But I think I do like this play overall. Now, note, this is a bit of a common problem with the going second with this deck, is that you still have the coin. This deck has no good way of using the coin besides double 1-drop. Or 2-drop 1-drop on turn 3. There's no decent way of using the coin. He's at the point of the game where he might just go Kill Command, Hero Power with the coin. It'd actually be a decent play. He doesn't have many beasts for the Kill Commands, no. He only has Animal Companions. In the budget version that I am actually playing, I put an Iron there instead of the Leroy. But, because it turns on Kill Command with a third creature. But Kill Command is in the deck not really because it gets turned on by beasts for the 5 damage, but it's more in the deck because it's an extra bit of burst, as opposed to it being a good burst, as it is in most beast decks. I just want to point out double Misha is hilarious in this situation because it's actually the beast he doesn't want to see. But he's going to power through this unless the Druid has some sort of Defender of Argus or a Iron Bark or an Ancient of War. But yeah, as I said, one thing I do have issues with in this deck, one of the things I do, which is not many, is the lack of silence. I do have some issues with the lack of silence because you can't get over some things like Taunted Sylvanas, and that's quite a hilarious play, by the way, trying to steal a Misha to protect himself. Does work, weirdly enough. But we see a bit of an issue with a lack of silence here. He has to use the Arcane Shot as burst, in my mind, because his opponent has the Healing Touches. We've seen Healing Touch, most likely as a second one. So if we look at actual burst, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in hand, and then 6, 7 with the Abomination. Misdirection could work here because he can misdirect a Harvest Golem into a Misha, for example, because what's going to happen most likely here is that his opponent's going to attack with his Cairn into the Abomination, reduce the damage on his board, and then attack with Harvest Golem. There's the Nourish. If he draws another Healing Touch, it's basically game over. There aren't that many ways of coming back from a second Healing Touch in this deck, which is one of the reasons why it has some issues matchup-wise. And we're going to see an Innervate and Ancient of Lore. That might as well be good game. It is possible to come back from this, but extremely unlikely. So we can, however, see Eaglehorn Bow, Arcane Shot on the Misha, Bluegill Warrior, Elven Archer on the 2-1, and then Hero Power most likely. Just hope for the best. It's not impossible to win from here, but it's very unlikely. And as I said at the beginning of this game, this is one of the reasons why it has some issues against Druid. And that's what we're going to see. So I would suggest pinging the 2-1 as opposed to the hero, which I think is what he's going to do here. It just reduces the damage he can be taking by 2. Because he'd be dead to a multitude of different things like swipe. And this is one of the reasons why I don't like Twitch. The video stop happens every 30 minutes roughly. Come on. Ah well, I'll be taking questions in chat right now while I try and get Twitch to restart. Wow, that actually didn't take very long. I would still recommend pinging the 2-1, because if you look at it, his opponent right now has 11 damage on board. And it means he's dead to things like Argent Commander. Yeah, he's going to just ping it. Now he has 9. He's still dead to things like Argent Commander and Druid of Claw, and that's basically a good game. So, as we saw, this game, it looked close, but it kind of wasn't. Like, it looks close. That's something I have realized, having played this deck in a tournament. Every single game you play with this looks close, just because of the nature of the deck. It's a charging deck, and your opponent is always on low life. But as we saw in that game, this particular deck has some issues against sustain. The Druid in this case sustained 13 points of life, and that was too much. It couldn't get through that extra bit without some lucky draws towards the end. So if you come across this kind of deck, if this actually becomes popular, which is starting to become amongst some of the Hunter players, I would definitely play some sustain in your deck, like a 1-off Healing Touch, an Ancient Allure, or 2-off Healing Touch in your deck as opposed to 1, which is what a lot of Druids have been doing, in fact. They've already been playing 1 Healing Touch. I'd probably bump that up to 2 if this becomes an actually popular deck, and it might. It's not impossible. It is a very powerful deck. As we're saying, it's actually breaking more than 50% in an incredibly high rank. Rank 1 is very, very high, and these are all tier 1 decks. None of the players here are bad. They're all very good players, and going higher than 50% win rate against them is an incredible achievement. Now, this particular hand, an interesting preference is for a Loot Hoarder over Novice Engineer. Normally, I do prefer the Novice Engineer over Loot Hoarder, but one against a Druid, because getting the Druid to hero power repeatedly is actually an advantage. Waste some turns, he doesn't remove stuff on our board as much. That's an advantage. However, the one problem with Loot Hoarder is that it dies to things like Novice Engineer, which is a bit of an issue. So we might see some sort of coin Wolf Rider, or Loot Hoarder Elven Archer trade could be another one. And we're going to see neither. He's very, very aggressive. I would probably have preferred the ping the 1-2 with Elven Archer, so that he doesn't have to deal with this kind of turn. It would give him an extra 1-1 on the board, and as we saw last game, he has some problems with using the coin in this deck. Going first is definitely an advantage. And now he's going to do the Elven Archer anyway. This is something which it's happened twice. It happened with Abusive Sergeant last time. And this is why I really do ask the question, why not just do it before? Why not just play the Elven Archer and get rid of the Novice Engineer before as opposed to now? And he would have gotten 1 extra damage with the Elven Archer. It's not a big deal, but it's something. Now, this is a really, really bad turn for him. He doesn't have any creatures to play, and he doesn't really want to throw out any of his spells either. Not a good turn for him. One of the negative points against this deck is the draw power. However, you can also say that draw power isn't as much of an issue when everything works this way, in terms of everything having charge, because every single thing, this kind of works like Argent Druid. For anyone who doesn't know about Argent Druid was a deck which I actually got to a top 4, and it was just all designed on dealing charge damage later on in the game, and it worked surprisingly well. Why? Because no one expects charge all the time. But nowadays, people play things like Ancient of War, which, as we're seeing at the moment, is brick walling him. He actually can't deal with this. He has to go for a lucky deadly shot, most likely. And that is most likely good game. There isn't a way of dealing with Ancient of War in this deck. As I said at the beginning, without deadly shot, there really isn't a way of dealing with Ancient of War. The funny thing is, if he had hit the Ancient of War with that deadly shot, this probably would have been the end of the game, because he would be really, really far ahead in board position. Thanks, Zixel, for linking that. So, this particular game is more or less over at this point. So, for the rest of this one, I'm just going to be taking questions in chat. So while I'm going over any of the plays happening, by all means put questions in chat and I'll answer them. This looks like an arcane shot, most likely. Yeah, arcane shot. But yeah, that proves how powerful Ancient of War is, just in general. Ancient of War stonewalls pretty much everything. And without silences and without double deadly shot, there really isn't a way around it. I think you might just tap out at this one. So let's skip ahead a bit. Actually, I wanted to do this in the standard way of downloading each individual game and putting them on private YouTube listing and then doing it that way, but you can't with other people's videos on Twitch. Very annoying. You actually can't do that. You'd have to record each individual video by watching it, screen share, and then do it that way. And it's just a nuisance. So we're going to skip into the next game. Now, before he went to Legend, he actually went 6-3 in the start of this video. We've already seen the 3 decks he loses to, one of which is the same deck, Druid Ramp, and the last one was Molten Giant. So for the next part of the video, which will be probably the next about 20 minutes, I'm going to be looking at some of his better matchups, which is where the 6 wins comes from, which puts him all the way up into Legend. If Twitch would like to work. Yeah, the deck, I'll actually I'll check if that's the correct one. I do believe it is. Pretty sure it is. Yeah, that would be the correct deck. I'll just link the same link that Zixel did. Okay. Shuffle forward a little bit. As I said, one of the least favorite things doing the actual weekly show on is on Twitch. I prefer using YouTube videos as opposed to Twitch videos. So we're going to see another Warlock aggro. As we saw earlier, this deck had no problem with Warlock aggro. It just took board position and then won. I think he's going to keep the explosive. Keeping the bow. I'm actually okay with keeping the bow because he can go turn 1 Leopardome, turn 2 bow with coin, and then he has 2 traps to fuel the bow. So I do like keeping this hand, especially when I'm only having 3 traps in his deck. So, Warlock aggro, most likely. Thought process is just deal direct in this situation. Trade when necessary. Let your traps do most of the trading. That idea. I think he's just going to go for the turn 1 Leopardome, turn 2 Eagle Hornbow, and just go for direct. Interesting. I'm not sure if I agree with that because then you lose a trigger on your bow. But I guess he's going to just say, well, the Flame Imp is going to deal 6 to you as opposed to 3. And his opponent might play a Blood Imp to play around explosive. So he gets some extra damage in. I think I do still prefer the Leopardome. Especially with this, he can't really play explosive. He can try, but if his opponent has Blood Imp, he's really, really bad position. Yeah, I think I would have still preferred the Leper Gnome on turn 1. Would have dealt with a lot of this. Oops. Sorry. So the question is, does he have the Blood Imp? That's what messes him up right now. Does he have the Blood Imp? Is that the correct play, was playing the Misdirect? He does have the Blood Imp. That's a problem. At this point, he just has to hope for the direct, because his opponent is on 22. But that was a super risky opening. It was really easy for his opponent to mess up. I think he just has to go for direct here. He's trading. This seems like a very, very odd game to me, actually, having to watch this game. I watched it earlier, and it did seem like an odd game. At least, there's a couple of odd plays further down the road, but the misdirect opening was the weirdest one. So I would have, I'm still adamant that I would have gone Leper Gnome, Coin, Eaglehorn. Although he could still win this because of how much direct damage his opponent is doing to himself. Like Eaglehorn Bow, Elven Archer would definitely do something here. So the trading might actually work. Just because of how much direct damage his opponent's done. He's life tapped twice and he's flame imped twice. That's 10 damage. Straight up. He's only had to do 8 so far to get him down to 12 on turn 4. And now that his opponent doesn't have as much board position, it's actually starting to look up. So, from here, I think the Warlock, that's the correct play. Just giving something to him. He's sussed out what his opponent is trying to pull off here. I think Animal Companion, see if you get Huffer, would be the correct play here. Because if he gets Huffer, it's a really, really big pain that he doesn't have to deal with. And he does get Huffer. I think RNG helps out a little bit in this situation. And he's going to go for direct. Because he has Leroy Jenkins. To be honest, Milglor, no one did see why this deck did so well. When this deck was discovered a couple of days ago, it went up on Reddit, and I was in Mana Grind at the time on Teamspeak, and Shiv pulled up. I think it was Shiv and Unicat, who usually surf out like Hunter decks and such. And no one could figure out the deck. It's so weird. It's such a weird deck, but it works. As we can see, like it's against Warlock aggro, and he's just about to win. More than likely, unless there's a second Defender of Argus, which is very unlikely. So this deck does work. It's very, very odd. It's one of the strangest decks I've ever seen, actually. It's the reason why I'm doing a weekly show on it. And for once, and for anyone who's followed me for a while, this is a rather big thing for me to say, this is actually a deck that Arkcruiser invented. He didn't just bring it back from previous days, like from Cockatrice and early beta. This is an actual new deck that no one could figure out. And it works. As I said, it's kind of a weird version of Argent Druid almost. But he's just going to take out that Warlock. That's the second Warlock he's taken out. As I said, it has a really good matchup against Warlock. About 60% win rate, probably. So we skip ahead a little bit to the next game. And it's another Warlock aggro. Yes, Charge is very, very powerful. Reckless Rocketeer in your opening hand is awful, but yeah, it's At least it's useful for late game. The rest of the hand is very good though. So we're going to see turn 1 Lepernon? Yeah. But anyway, as I said on the last tournament recap, if anyone has any decks or series of videos that they want me to go over, then just post them in comments on any of my videos and I should see them. Now this is most likely a Elven Archer on the Lepernon, and then an Elven Archer straight to the Warlock. Get some board advantage. Yep, that's what he's going to do. You just see the person typing to it, beat that asshole. Now, really? You have to cover the screen? One of the reasons I don't like watching first person perspective. Anyway, life tap opens up Loot Hoarder for here. He just life tapped on turn 2. That's a really weak play for a Warlock aggro deck, life tap on turn 2. Gives him an opening to go for some extra board position, whereas normally he'd just go for a removal spell plus direct. And now he's in a much better position than the Warlock player. Less cards in hand, but all the cards in his deck do more than the Warlock aggro deck. Felguard is an interesting response. Not one we see very often. But Kill Command is going to deal with this. Technically, he should have attacked with Loot Hoarder first to see what he was going to draw. It wouldn't have mattered in this case, but it's a good habit to get into. Always draw first if you can, especially if you're involving a Loot Hoarder, where your plan on killing it with Kill Command anyway, just attack with Loot Hoarder first. So, like, as we can see, there are a lot of misplays which people make without really thinking. And they're not always obvious. They look obvious, but they're not always obvious. Especially when you're playing. Don't ever think that misplays are really, really obvious to fix. Word of advice for a lot of people is try playing... Wow, he's going all in on this. Whoa, no, don't do... See? 92 rank in NA just failed playing around an explosive trap. You know, this is painful sometimes for me to watch. This is really painful for me to watch sometimes. Ugh. Some of the mistakes people make is mind-boggling. Or are mind-boggling. Okay. So now he's just going to go Argent Commander. Oh, that was horrible. Yeesh. But yeah, he's going to win this game. Like, that play didn't help, but I don't think it mattered, to be honest. He would have still won this game, because he has so much charge in his hand with the hero power, it helps out. And his opponent's just going to concede, probably realizing that the play he made was the worst one in the history of Warlocks. Yeah, people just don't know how to play against Hunters anymore. I agree. Okay, we'll have a look at one more game, which I do believe is the one that puts him into Legend. The question is, does he send back Loot Hoarder? I don't think he does. So we're going to see Turman Elven Archer. Now, we saw him against the Paladin earlier, and while not being a game that was as fast as Warlock aggro, because of the lack of self-damage, it was not a difficult matchup for him at all. Interesting thing to see that there's no 2-drop for the Paladin. Is he going to go coin into another spell? Or is he just going to play coin for the Pyromancer trigger? Interesting use of the coin. I like it. Yeah, Leper Gnome. I like that he's not using Arcane Shot. He's allowing his opponent to be silenced. He has to trade his Wild Pyromancer or he can't cast spells. I think he's probably going to go Arcane Shot Hero Power or Animal Companion Arcane Shot. Probably Arcane Shot the Wild Pyromancer and then just attack. It depends what you think is the safer play and the more powerful play. The more powerful play is to go straight for him. The safer play is to kill the Fairy Dragon. Oh, we have a Twitch video stop. Again, it's 52 minutes. It's roughly every half an hour. More like 25 minutes. So he doesn't decide to kill the Wild Pyromancer, again maintaining the lack of ability to play spells. True Silver does mess him up a bit here. True Silver is one of the best aggro stoppers in the game. It's very good at stopping damage, heals him up a bit, deals with some of this stuff. Eaglehorn Bow, Explosive Trap is an extremely powerful play, and that's what he's going to do. Now, if there's no ooze from the paladin, then there's going to be some serious issues damage-wise. Again, he should have attacked with the Fairy Dragon, because it could have been a misdirection. Possibly. Actually, it wouldn't have mattered with misdirection. What am I talking about? It could have been Freezing Trap, though. I think we're just going to see the Argent Commander and then attack, attack, attack plan. Seems to be the game plan in general with this deck. I'm seeing that Paladins have some serious issues. Like, he's stopping some of the bleeding, but not all of it. It's having a lot of issues stopping the damage coming through. Defender of Argus is a card that should never be underestimated, but a lot of people are dropping it. Same with Silences. They're both incredibly powerful cards, and I would recommend playing them as much as possible. I think... How much damage has he got? Not enough would be the answer. He's slightly short. One short, to be exact. But anyway, that's more or less good game, unless his opponent has a Guardian of Kings. And then I think it's still good game. Is that a good game? Heals back up to 8, he goes down to 3. Not quite. He can do 7. He should definitely go for the Reckless Rocketeer as opposed to the Kill Command. Because you never know, your opponent might have some taunt. If we see another Guardian of Kings, it's going to be hilarious. And that's a good game. Unless it's a Holy Light? Holy Light. I think it's still a good game though. He still has 7. That's lethal. So as we saw there, sustain decks can work, but you need taunt with your sustain. Otherwise that happens. And we're gonna stop there. Okay, I'm gonna do a 5-minute Q&A, and then I'm gonna sign off for the weekly show. So if anyone has any questions, as we saw in that particular one, it was a bit of a different sort of flow to normal, because I had to use a large video as opposed to several different ones, because I can't chop up Twitch videos, or if you can, I don't know how to. So as we saw there, we saw 5-3 losses. And the three losses were to two decks. We saw Molten Giant with Sustain in the form of armor, which dealt with the damage quite well by putting out large threats. We saw a turn 4 Molten Giant. And then we saw Druid Ramp with Sustain beat it twice. Why is that deck such a good counter? It's because the Taunt is very, very good against this deck. As he's not playing Silences, he's playing one Deadly Shot, and he's not playing Hard Removal, besides that one Deadly Shot. So Taunt is a good way of dealing with this. The other one is Sustain, which stops him from getting direct damage through. But as we saw later on, the decks this is good against are, weirdly enough, Paladin Sustain, Paladin Aggro, Warlock Aggro are the three we saw. Cantrip Rogue, I can also say it has a decent matchup against, it's about 50-50. But aggro decks have some serious issues with this because they suck at defense. Defense is not their strong point, and when you put an aggro deck on the defensive, it loses. And with Paladin Sustain, we saw that unless they have Defender of Argus, they can't stop the damage. They just delay it with the Sustain, and they still die because they don't have the taunt effects. So this is actually quite a powerful deck with some very simple counters, but the simple counters are not realized by a lot of players. Now, ways of getting around these counters is doing things like putting Silences in the deck, maybe. Second Deadly Shot, I don't think so, because you can only have room for one, but I'd say Silences, definitely. And if you don't have Leroy Jenkins, you could put something in like Arcane Golem. Arcane Golem would be very good in this deck. Ironbeak Owl to turn on Kill Command as opposed to Spellbreaker. Things like that. There's a couple little tweaks you can do. The other one is take your time while playing this. It looks like a simple deck, but the play isn't always obvious. My alternative to Leroy Jenkins was, in my version, is Ironbeak Owl, because I make up for the damage loss with the extra Kill Command alternative. But Leroy Jenkins is more powerful than Ironbeak in this deck. You could also play Arcane Golem, as I said, to substitute Leroy, and then put in some Ironbeaks instead of things like Bluegills, maybe. There's a couple of different things you can tweak around. Deck list is in chat at the moment. I'll put the deck list in the description of the YouTube video as well for anyone who wants to check that out. So anyway, I'll take 2 more questions if anyone has them. Wow, it's actually a pretty long weekly show. This was like an hour long. Oh well, my tournament recaps are shorter videos. One video a week that's ridiculously long, one video a week that's actually like 15 minutes. Countering, in, as I said with Druid Ramp, for example, is a very powerful deck against this. Taunt and healing, but you need both. You can't just play Taunt because he can just burst you down with hero power and spells. And you can't just play healing because we see what happens when that happened last time. So you just burst through the sustain. You need a combination of both. In most cases, that involves Earthenring Farseers for a lot of classes, but Paladin with Defender of Argus and Sunwalkers such can deal with this. Druid Ramp deals with this incredibly well. This deck, it's good against, there are a couple of tier 1 decks right now. The main 2 tier 1 decks are Rogue Cantrip is the best deck in the format at the moment, or most consistent deck. Warlock Aggro, and then we've got Paladin and Mage Aggro to watch out for, and Druid Ramp. Those are the 5 decks to watch out for, the ones that are semi-common. And then every so often you get a Shields Up deck. Now, Rogue Cantrip is 50-50 for this deck, which is incredible to get a 50-50% win rate against one of the best decks in the format. Warlock aggro always loses to this almost. It's like 65-70% almost win rate. Paladin and Mage aggro have some serious issues against this, especially with the lack of sustainability in Paladin aggro decks and the lack of freezes now in Mage aggro decks. And Ramp has a very good matchup. So overall, it actually has a pretty good matchup with everything. If Warlock aggro stops being played, then it becomes less powerful. If aggro decks entirely stop being played, then this is not viable. Because it has a 50-50% win rate against one deck, and the rest it loses to. Shields Up is incredible against this deck. Ancient Watcher with Taunt stops it. Cold. Ancient Watcher with Taunt or a Defender of Argus buff, as well as the Taunt, is just stone dead. So yeah, I do think this can do well. It might do well in a tournament. I wouldn't be surprised if it did well in a tournament. Because it does have a fairly good record against most of the matchups. So anyway, thank you all for tuning in. This has been Jotto. If you like the content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Put any comments in the comment section below of the actual video when this goes up, probably tomorrow. Depends on how fast Twitch uploads it. And yeah, if there's any quality issues on the actual video, then I'll put the link of the archived video on Twitch in the description as well, because the quality on that one should be slightly better. But anyway, thank you all for watching. This has been Jotto, signing off.